Hey everybody, Edo here, and I am excited this morning because I have Chandler Copenhaver on the line. Say hello, Chandler.
Hey guys,
And
how are
he
you?
is the Director of Business Development for CrowdOx, a uh, Kickstarter backer support, creator support tool set that helps with all sorts of fulfillment and management and after Kickstarter sales and a variety of things. And we'll be talking about those services, so he'll do a much better job explaining them. But to start, I like to ask everyone sort of, how did you come to CrowdOx? I think you guys have been around for 4 or 5 years. Like, how did you get into that business? Has it been what you've been doing forever? That kind of thing.
Yeah, so I guess the genesis of my involvement with crowdfunding in general started back actually when I was a student, and I backed my first campaign on Kickstarter back in 2012. I backed the Pebble Watch,
Oh, sure.
and yeah, and so the original one. They've had a couple, but the so I backed that campaign and got involved and thought, kind of got super excited about what Kickstarter was doing, just because I was involved with kind of working with small businesses and doing some consulting, and Kickstarter is pretty amazing for what it does for small businesses and just people in general that have cool ideas. And so I got involved more on a backer level for a couple of years, and then back in about 2013, 14, really it was 14 actually. I started working with creators. So I've been working with creators on Kickstarter since about then. In various different formats. But I mean, it's heavily in marketing for a number of years. And what's interesting, I wasn't very involved in the tabletop space, and not because I didn't want to be. In fact, I did. I was very much a gamer, still, very much a gamer. But at the time, a lot of the marketing agencies and companies that I was working with weren't really working with tabletop creators, and so mostly because they just didn't understand the market. They didn't quite understand how that worked. So anyway, I was mostly working with non-tabletop projects, watches and backpacks, and all the other things that are out there.
And at this point in the story, is it CrowdOx or?
No, actually, yeah, I
Okay.
got involved with CrowdOx in early 2017,
Okay.
and so yeah, it's been 2 years.
And um, so basically, you were doing it sort of as independently helping different creators. Sort of,
Mhm.
I mean, were you part of the what was the name of that? Like, there was a Kickstarter program. It wasn't like Kickstarter Advise, a Kickstarter Expert or something like
The
that. Were you part
experts.
of the?
I wasn't like on their experts page or nothing like anything like that. I worked with a couple of agencies, the marketing agencies that exist out there, and contracted for a few of those guys as in the same time as like doing kind of independent consulting with different project creators. So
And
yeah, various stuff.
and then so you start up with CrowdOx a few years ago, 2 years ago, and then I mean, CrowdOx services a variety of markets. It's not just board games, I believe. Uh, so, are you focused on all sorts of different types of campaigns, or are you specializing in board game? I mean, I know you because you definitely are. At least one market you do is board games, but are there more? Are you dedicated to that? How does that work?
Yeah, so we service all campaigns that run on Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and Fig, and then even some other. So we've started working with people that are just doing strictly a pre-order, as well as a couple of Japanese platforms that do crowdfunding. So it's I mean, 95% Kickstarter though. And of the Kickstarter campaigns, we do work heavily with the tabletop creators, and probably for two reasons. One being that there's obviously there's a huge, like, it's one of the biggest categories, and so there's naturally a lot of campaigns released in the tabletop category. But I think part of the reasoning is both my own and even like our founders. So our two founders, both whom are the developers that created the software back, like we talked about 4 or 5 years ago. They both were, in fact, started it because they had their own game. They had their own Kickstarter project and said, okay, this is difficult. And back in that time, there wasn't a lot of options.
Sure.
It's about around the same time that the other two services got started, and
we're talking about BackerKit and Pledge Manager.
And Pledge Manager, right? Yep. So BackerKit and Pledge Manager, both I believe were around. They all kind of started around the same time.
Well, the need was there, right?
Yep. So they started that, and mostly for their own benefit. But because that's part of our like genesis, part of our origin story, if you will, I think that there's definitely kind of a sweet spot in our heart for the tabletop space. I like we talked about, I personally play a lot of games and feel like I'm a pretty substantial part of that community. That to me is important, and so we do cater quite a bit in what we do, and some of our earliest customers were like, for example, Academy Games. We worked with Academy Games for a long time, and so a lot of our earliest customers were board game campaigns, and so we've really kind of catered a lot of the structure of the system and some different things really for this community.
Well, I want to ask you some questions about business development, but before that, just so now that we've sort of caught up to today, to give everyone sort of a perspective on Crowdox, right? Like, so as far, from, I'm not, we've talked a number of times, I'm not currently using any, is there a general term, like, for, like, I keep wanting to say, like, BackerKit or Pledge Manager, but those are all, like, also names of the other things, but it's like a pledge manager. So it starts at the survey, right? Like, so, I mean, the relationship doesn't start at the survey, but you basically, instead of going the route where on Kickstarter, I download the addresses onto my, as CSVs or onto as Excels, and then start managing that list and then fulfilling directly by myself or with a service. That all gets basically channeled into you guys. Can you walk through that process and then the services you guys typically offer?
Yeah, absolutely. So just, I mean, for clarification, because I think there's some people that are curious about this, we actually have a really great relationship with Kickstarter as a platform. Our service doesn't necessarily remove the need. It simply just enhances what Kickstarter already provides. And, actually in talking with some of their executives, in fact, I've met them at multiple conventions, and at CES a couple of years ago specifically, we had a conversation and said, I was always curious, like, what do you think of what we do? Because, we offer, Kickstarter has a platform, and I got some context, and really was, originally Kickstarter, it wasn't designed necessarily originally for what it is today, right? It was much more indie, much smaller in general. You don't usually have campaigns that have thousands of backers. Typically, you have a couple hundred supporters, and how they built structure, and so that's where that usually works out great. Like if you have a smaller campaign,
sure, 200 people is no big deal.
Exactly, a CSV of 200 people is not a problem. But what we thought is, if you have a campaign that's getting more substantial, 300 plus backers, and it starts to get to a place where there's so many things that Crowdox can do that helps a campaign, and really all the other services, I should say, help kind of facilitate this gap of, the campaign ends, and now your backers have information that they need to provide. That the amount of information needed from a backer is actually quite a bit less for a tabletop game than it is like, a jacket that has different colors and different styles. And so, but, there are a lot of things that we need to gather like shipping information from the backers. And as a creator yourself, you know, like, you get there to that point. Now you have not just one CSV, but you have as many as you have pledge levels. So maybe
Yeah,
6.
man, it'd be nice if they would even just consolidate that
Combine it,
into one download. They
right?
like here's
Like a
the
master.
individuals. Well, I
Yeah,
you have to do it. I mean, again, not being somebody who's using one of these services, like the first thing you have to do is combine them all, and it's a
right.
pain. But
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah. I don't. There's some things that you kind of wonder, like, I wonder why couldn't they just do this, right? And I've asked them that myself, which is funny because it's why we are in business, is to
sure,
kind of
sure.
facilitate that gap. But they've kind of stated that, at least for now, like their emphasis and where they put resources are just different places right now. Um, and in fact, I had a great conversation. Just so I go to the Consumer Electronics Show every year, CES, and it's the biggest like electronic show.
Sure.
It's actually the only show that I go to that's not a board game show. And
Oh,
um,
it's a fun one. It's giant.
oh
I've been a
yeah,
number of
it,
times, but
it,
it gets crazy.
yeah, it's a crazy one. But Kickstarter's there. They have a lot of their team there, and so got to spend quite a bit of time with them. But yeah, they just don't emphasize on it. So what we did, we actually, back in 2016, in like the summer, those that have been doing Kickstarter for a long time will remember back before then, there were only 2 collaborator statuses, or permission types. You had one for your community and one to edit the campaign. And it was at that time that we were working with some of Kickstarter's development team. And we created with them that third fulfillment permission. And that permission we created specifically with them because we needed a way to provide, like, have a creator provide us information in a secure fashion. And, because we don't need full access to a campaign, we felt that it was a little much to ask for somebody's username and password. Which was what we had to do back then, and what pretty much everyone was doing. And I don't know if everyone still is or not. I know we're not. So from that time forward, you may have noticed on campaigns we work with, you see CrowdOx as a collaborator, and that's the reason we have that fulfillment permission sync that allows us to pull those CSVs, or those Excel files, basically directly into our system. And what's cool about it is that it actually continues to provide that information. So with that sync, let's say a backer decides to cancel their credit card, or they request a refund, or whatever happens there, you don't have to re-export that file and then the API direct sync into the system.
Right.
And so those are like little things, but what I've kind of found is CrowdOx is a combination of like a whole bunch of little things that just alleviate a lot of like time and hassle for the creator.
And so, but to get specific around that, you dialed into sort of the change over time with Kickstarter and your connect, how you've been able to look at your services. But in terms of those services specifically,
Mm-hmm.
here are the 4 key benefits. A creator can get from using CrowdOx.
The 4 things that a creator benefits from, the primary one is organization of that information, that data. So as you mentioned, the alternative is a lot of spreadsheets and having to double check things and kind of go back and forth, and it does drain a lot of time. It's very much doable. Impossible task. In campaigns, in fact, I met one at CES. They had 5 figures in terms of the number of backers on their campaign, and they did it all themselves. And so it's not to say that it's not doable, but it alleviates a lot of time. And it also removes a lot of potential error that would happen because of the way that it brings into the system. Each backer has their own profile, and so you can kind of organize all of the information and really kind of get down to that at a deeper level. The second thing, second to the organization of the information, is being able to then offer a backer kind of more of a this is kind of a discussion about Kickstarter in general, right? Kickstarter is counterintuitive in some ways compared to the normal e-commerce experience.
Sure.
And that's definitely intentional. They're intentional about not focusing too much on, making it like a store. I mean, they're very clear about that. But a lot of backers that come through, especially new backers that maybe aren't as familiar, it can be kind of a clunky process, and there's a lot of confusion sometimes, especially because creators all do something a little bit different. And the timing is usually varying, and when do they collect shipping? Is it right after the campaign, or is it right before shipping? And so there's a lot of variation there, and so it gives a backer more of a fluid experience, a little bit more of an e-commerce like experience, where they can go in, confirm their details,
Right.
And they can then also confirm like if they want to add on any additional items. That's kind of a big thing. That's probably number 3 of the 4, which is that a creator can offer additional items to these backers. And it's not just offering more items, it's being able to be a bit more dynamic. For example, on Kickstarter, we're limited to a pledge level that has a certain number of rewards, and it's kind of, this is what you get. And that's okay, except that sometimes there's frustration where I want this, but I also want this, right?
Yeah, managing a cart is not a concept on
Right.
Kickstarter, right? You
Yeah,
just
it's
have
not.
bundles, this or that.
Mm-hmm. And especially, and I've seen some of your campaigns, and when you have specific rewards and things being offered, there are times where you have backers that they want both this and that, but they don't want all of what's involved in that $100
Sure. Or
pledge.
they want an extra copy of the game or
Yeah.
something that's not really covered. I mean, certainly, the backer list management aspect of it, the sort of user experience and storefront aspect of it, and being able to have that pick what you want,
Mm-hmm.
cart management, however you want to describe it, are certainly weaknesses on the platform for Kickstarter, and that's, I mean, I think that was the gap that created you and all your Crowdox and all the competitors, right? Is really being able to do that, and then be able to continue to manage that list of people and communicate with
Yeah.
them. I think that was the third or the fourth. What was your fourth item, or did we hit
Yeah,
them
that was
all?
the third. The fourth item is being able to then provide that information in a clean way. And we have really cool like filters and such that lets you like filter that information and then either export or directly deliver that information to shipping providers.
Right.
And so those the companies that are going to actually ship the products out, which to clarify for some, we don't do that. So I have had people ask that, but we have a lot of partners that we work with, and really it just is up to who the creator's planning to work with. We can then provide that information. And I know I've seen some creators that spend countless hours and manpower to like make sure, go back and like double check and kind of adjust everything there. And that's kind of a nice thing, is that it should be very fluid. Like I'm talking like minutes to be able to go in, you log into the platform and you say, here's who I want to pull out. Maybe it's like all of your UK backers, for example, or yeah, United Kingdom and or Europe in general, right? And so you want to pull all of those individuals out that got a certain item, and you can pull all of them out and get them ready. Um,
And having
so
having talked with a number of fulfillment centers, a lot of them are for them the process of using the services through the pledge manager programs is or applications or platforms is much easier, right? They're able to just sync their systems together, and it becomes a much more straightforward process. When an address is updated, it's updated for everyone.
yep,
It's much more fluid. It's not sort of sending around lists of um, spreadsheets of names that then have to be imported and managed accordingly. So there's a lot of it simplify. It's a lot of efficiency in the system compared to a manual process, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. I tell a lot of people like when you're at this stage, and I kind of consider this like Kickstarter's fun and it's exciting and it's stressful and really like a lot of work. but like it's also kind of fun because you have a number that's continually changing, and hopefully more backers are coming in, that kind of thing. But once the campaign's over, it's not the fun part for a lot of people,
It's
especially
a different stage.
yeah, it's a different stage, and it's not the fun part in terms of just because in general you were working, with people who are the inventors, the creators, the designers, and so you get to this stage of things where now we got to go manufacture something, and then it's also about building your business, or like your online presence and websites and Facebook pages, and like some of this part that a lot of people don't enjoy as much, right? And so I kind of look at it like the unsexy part of the campaign, right? And so because of that,
It's the sausage making, right?
it's not the part that everyone's like dying to do, right?
Sure.
And so because of that, it really helps like eliminate a lot of that headache that's involved. And I actually, having worked on campaigns on a personal level, like and kind of being involved with that process, I know like it gets to where there's a lot of you're spinning a lot of plates, right? And you're kind of doing that. And so if any time and effort that can be eliminated from that process and can be focused into, rewriting the rule book and kind of getting those things polished, and, each of those little items I think is valuable.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting over the last 5 years or 4 or 5 years as the services have become more prevalent. The backer expectation and relationship has changed. It went from a point where, I don't know about the balance, but certainly you'd have a volume of people frustrated if you use the pledge manager and just want to use the Kickstarter survey, and they're taking my information and da 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 da. And over these last few years, it has absolutely swung towards the opposite case, where people are surprised or confused when you're not using a pledge manager, and you're not having a secondary service on the back of it, and people want to be able to go in for $1 and upgrade their pledge, or they've become accustomed to those platforms being available a lot. If you're a regular Kickstarter user, you're sort of at the point where whichever of these that get used, you still sort of have an account, and they have your address, and you hit OK, and it's in there. So there's been a real shift from a end user expectation and experience perspective. So there's much more comfort with it. Whereas for sure, originally it seemingly was a turnoff to some backers, but I definitely think that is an old problem. The other half of it is obviously what's the business model. So you have your service, the platform, these like big benefits from the survey through to fulfillment. What business? How are you as a creator? What are my options when I say, hey, I want to use your platform? How much is it going to cost me? Is it a percent? How does that all work?
So the way that we focus on the way that we charge, and kind of the way that the model in which we do that is focused on the backers, because for us, each backer that you bring to the table as a creator represents to us little microtransactions per project or per creator, right? And so let's say a project that has 1,000 backers, and in that instance, that's how many thousands of emails that will be sent out, and address verifications and things like that we'll provide. And so we charge on a per backer basis. It does range a little bit. Usually it's around and then additional revenue raised through CrowdOps.
Right when you went there, right when you said the percent or the amount, it like fuzzed out. Could you say that just one sentence again?
Yeah, of course.
It was almost intentional. What did you say?
Yeah, right. It's $1, typically $1 per backer.
Got it.
And I said there's some variation to that, and then 5% of like additional revenue raised on CrowdOps.
And so and just as a part for some context for some people, when you're talking about 5%, that's And that does that include credit card fee, or doesn't include credit card fee at that point?
Does not.
Right.
So
So it's equivalent to Kickstarter. So on Kickstarter, you're going to do your campaign, and you're going to get charged. It sometimes it's more like 9%, but basically 5% from Kickstarter for their fees, and then 5% for their processing fees of credit
yeah.
cards. And
Yep.
so,
And it's a little bit different in terms of that, like the way that it processes. The way that CrowdOx does it is, and I think it's even a little different than the process of some of the Pledge Manager. Essentially, as a creator, you would attach your own Stripe account to CrowdOx. And so what that means is whatever your Stripe fee is, most people have it's basically 3.5%, 2.9 plus 30 cents per transaction, I think is the standard. I think it does vary a little bit for people that are in international,
sure.
outside the U.S. But
Well, I was just saying in terms of as a creator, when I think of if I sell if I did I had $100 bundle. And I was going to sell it on Kickstarter, they would take $10. $10 would come out. I'd get 90 for that bundle. And if instead, if it would basically be the equivalent if I had $1 pledge tier, and then they came in and did it on CrowdOx, roughly the same amount there from between your fee and the services fee. So it's an equivalent sort of off the top platform fee to Kickstarter.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, it's essentially the same. The nice thing too, we in the tabletop category especially, I mean, this is the case in other places on Kickstarter as well, but mostly board games now, like you mentioned, the dollar pledge is kind of a big deal now. And it's more of a big deal now than it was even 2 years ago, right? It's become more used as a backer to say, I'm going to pledge $1, follow you along, see how things are going, and maybe decide to jump to a higher level later, maybe jump into the pledge manager later and upgrade.
Oh yeah, it's super problematic for me now. So I don't offer $1 because I'm not using a pledge manager, but I don't offer $1 fee or tier, whatever pledge.
Yeah.
I like to go right to here's the game.
Uh-huh.
But in the last campaign with Skulk Hollow, maybe even Heroes Welcome, but more with Skulk Hollow, there was a bunch of people who just pledged $1. It wasn't an option, but they still just pledged $1, and they're like, "When's the pledge manager?" And it's and I had it in 3 places. I wasn't using one, and it was just sort of no, man. I'm not using one. You didn't pledge for anything. You just
upgrade now, or you're
and then you have to do a little okay, there's a confusion here. We can I'll take care of it. But it really stands to show how much that's moved the needle. I know. I don't remember if it was Jamie Stegmaier or if it was a different blog post, but there was a lot of conversations about the impact that's having. On people's ability to, I think it might have been, maybe it was James Hudson having to do with title, whatever the name of that game was. Yeah, around how 40 some absurd number back for $1 on that project, and then making it hard to actually predict your volume and how many of those people are actually going to convert into buyers as opposed to watchers.
I had one creator that did a really they have kind of a unique approach to this. They differentiate a late backer and a pre-order as two things. And so what they do is they give backers, so their campaign ends, and then they open things up where they'll take, I believe it's 2 or 3 weeks. It's basically that time frame before Kickstarter provides the funds. They kind of are doing their last check and everything. They give that final 2 weeks, what they call a late pledge period. Still pledge at the same price, and you can still come in and I think they use, through the pledge management, they're going to, let them come in that way. But and then once that period is over, it's now what they call the pre-order period. And it's during that period that it's a little more expensive or more prohibitive, and you don't get the product as quick as everyone else. And so they have kind of that unique approach to it. And I thought that was kind of a I liked that approach. I think it made a little bit more sense in general. But yeah, it's an interesting like world now. It has changed the playing field a little bit, and now you can pledge even if it's not on a reward level, and pledge $1 still, like kind of like you're having. Um, I guess the reason why I brought that up, we seen this as like a dramatic increase, and so we just for context on the per backer fees and such, we actually don't charge that part of a fee on those backers that have pledged $1,
Oh, that's nice.
pledge level or not, because to us it doesn't. Our hope is, and what a lot of creators do is they, when you log in to a CrowdOx survey or an order confirmation survey, they have the option to upgrade by pledge level. And it's our hope that that happens. That's great for the creator. It's where a good amount of revenue can come from for them. And so, so anyway, yeah, if they're $1 backer, it doesn't make sense to charge $1 for that. And it's actually, I argue for the $1 pledge level. There is in the culture or community that is, this world of crowdfunding, and especially in the tabletop space, we have the argument of, should I have the $1 pledge level or not? And that's definitely a big thing. And I typically argue for, the main reason being is that in this world of building communities and building followings and really treating backers and our communities with respect and effectively, it's difficult to build a community. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, sometimes a lot of money to do so. And so any person that supports a project for, even $1, I think has a great value, right? Those people add value. It's, in the business world, they call it a lifetime customer value. And each of those individuals, whether or not they even upgrade later, may stick around and continue following and listening in on what's going on. And at some later date, decide to, patronage to the company and back a project or even just buy on their web store or something later. I think it's fascinating because as business owners, we tend to spend money to try to acquire emails or try to acquire potential customers. And in Kickstarter, they pay you $1 instead of you pay them. You pay $1 in ad spend or whatever. They pay you $1 to participate as kind of a follower. And so for that reason, I usually say that I encourage the $1 pledge. And I might be getting off on a tangent here, but I usually encourage it because for that reason, as well as in the Kickstarter user interface, so the UI on the app specifically, if you're using your phone to back a campaign, a lot of people don't know this, but you actually, when you pull open on the app to a campaign, it doesn't, if you don't have a $1 pledge level, it doesn't give you that button that says pledge.
Donate. Yeah, donate.
The no reward option. That's only in the UI on the website on the computer, but it's not on the app. And so to me, that kind of it's just another barrier to entry. It's another thing that might prevent somebody from kind of jumping on board, which might convert later or become.
Sure.
So,
well, no, I mean, for what it's worth, it's a fairly compelling argument. Having been in that conversation multiple times over the years. So the last little bit we've used up a lot of the time, and it's been super interesting. But I did want to ask a little bit about sort of the business development process because sort of I work in technology and video games, but I've worked closely with a lot of BD teams and people responsible for business development, and that process is a matter of sort of constant communication and reach out and working with clients and working them through the funnel and touching base with them and going through that process. How do you balance? Because a lot, the tabletop is a very close-knit community and people are communicating with each other. And they're, for the amount of volume we do, there are a lot of the people who are doing it year over year. How do you balance sort of that outreach, like out, following up with people, but not too much, and sort of toe that line.
Yeah, it's a hard line to toe, right? Like it's definitely been a challenge, and for CrowdOx, it's definitely been a challenge. So as we kind of talked about, I got involved about 2 years ago. CrowdOx at the time had been around for a couple of years, but we grew slowly. Kind of, I mean, we're very much a startup, grew out of the kind of the garage kind of a thing, right? And very different than some of our other competitors. And so coming to the market, if you will, we were pretty much had a very small percentage of the market share of the potential creators that we had worked with was very small, and so we really had to find our stride, and it's taken a lot of time actually, and a lot of focus to be able to do that in a way that is appropriate. It's difficult because people don't want to be sold to, and it's just a
Sure.
clear position. If I'm it doesn't matter if the product is really great. It really it is important how people are approached and that effect. And so we've continued to kind of fine tune that and adjust. And it's been, we have growing pains like any other company trying to kind of realize the best effect or the best approach to make those contacts, and to how persistent do you be, and how much do you follow up. And because the nature of just all of our lives is we do get crazy busy. And so yeah, it's definitely been a challenge, and we're still growing and learning. But our main effort has been to really just be consistent, and to consistently be a good voice, a supportive voice for campaign creators. And we're here for the long haul to continue to help creators, and that's at the core kind of competency or value of what we're trying to do for these campaigns that we work with.
Got it. And so, in terms of that balance, I mean, you're at conventions. It seems like you're pretty regular in conventions. You're
Yep.
definitely active on, social media and Facebook and those other channels.
Hmm.
How are, I mean, so, well, I guess one question is, so in terms of that percentage world, I don't have any insight. Are you guys still in the small tier? Are you moving up? Like, where? How much has your business grown comparatively? Like, do you have any public metrics? Like, how do you fit into that pie now?
Oh, we're competing head on at this point. It's taken 2 years. We're kind of from like where we really started accelerating. But we're working with a very large percentage of the campaigns now, especially the tabletop category, working with a lot of publishers and again, I got involved, I got excited because the product was amazing. I thought the product itself was really good, but just not known at all, not well known. And there were some other names in the space that for great reasons, they had, BackerKid, Pledge Manager, both have good teams. They have a good product. And so it was a lot to kind of come up against, if you will. And like I said, I mean, I'm a frequent backer myself. I interface with their platforms and with them in general quite often, and we have a lot of respect for what they do.
Sure, sure.
And so, but yeah, it's at this stage we're working with a lot of creators, and we're super excited about that. We're growing quite rapidly and working with more and more campaigns, and I think we're part of that. A lot of it, especially in this community, is all about word of mouth, and people really realizing, yeah, there's a good opportunity to have a really smooth and good flowing system that the cost is reasonable, and that works out well for the creator.
Yeah. And yeah, it must be that's the balance, right? I think that word of mouth piece is where basically it's really simple. Whenever a new creator comes around, they say, "Hey, what service? Like, hey, when I finish this Kickstarter, how do I handle like fulfillment? Should I use a pledge manager? Which pledge manager should I use?" I mean, like
Yeah.
it's practically. I mean, if you want to get stomped, you do it in a forum with James Matthew in it, and he'll just be like, check the We already posted about this. Search for
There's the link.
posts. Yeah, go
Yeah.
use the link. Comes out like a hammer on somebody. Um, well, okay. So to wrap it up, um, I mean, obviously, you have a relationship with Kickstarter as a platform in a very different way than simply a creator does or a backer does. When you sort of look at, you know, the world of crowdfunding today, and you look at where we are, and let's keep it the tabletop because that's certainly my
Of course.
audience.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, what do you think's going on? I mean, what do you think are the next things we're going to be seeing in 2019? What's exciting? What are you concerned about? That kind of thing.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of excitement still in crowdfunding. I think what's an interesting, so there's been a conversation really for the last maybe 2 years, 1 to 2 years, of a bubble that might burst,
Sure.
and this can't continue like this forever. And in a way, that's very much a true statement. And when it comes to like it can't last this can't go like this forever, something will change. I don't believe in the whole concept of a bubble bursting. I don't think that it's going to happen exactly like that. But I think what we will come to, and we're starting already to come to a point, is that the number of people that are backing campaigns is growing, um, but we do have a lot of people that are backing all of these projects, and you do get to a point where you have to start being more selective. And so the number of creators that are launching campaigns and are bringing new items and new creations to the market, specifically board games to the market, and the number of people playing those games, I think that we have the number of people kind of participating or joining isn't as fast as we need it to be in order to kind of sustain that growth. And I do think that is true. And so what that means is we will have this like sharpening of the sword kind of a thing that will
Sure.
happen, where people will have to be more creative and have to be more innovative, and will have to spend more effort on developing a better game, and not just throw something out there. And it's to the benefit, I think, of the community, and to the quality of products and of games that we'll get over the next number of years. And you start to see that, right, with like Lucky Duck Games, and they've got Chronicles of Crime that is very innovative and very unique, and you have more games that I think will start to play in that space, where they start to blend in technology, and they start to find new ways to kind of bring that excitement level up. So I think we'll see more of that as we go along. And even James Hudson, we've got Sky.
Well, I mean, the level of execution on some of these mega projects are ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, they're teams of people, right? They're
Yeah,
large teams of people.
it's not an indie single individual or small team. I mean, it has to shift for that. What's kind of happening. But I don't think it will ostracize the indie creator necessarily, but it will change things.
Yeah, the thing I like to compare it to for people is just the App Store, right? Sure, every once in a
Yeah.
while you still see a title that's super indie that comes through that has that vibe that gets
Mhm.
recognition and pops up, but the volume of successful indie, the percentage of people who hit that lightning in
Yeah,
a bottle becomes smaller and smaller.
it does. And actually, so the reason why I say I really like, there's a part of that I really like, is I'm a true believer in like real art. Like there are those games and those products that just have that X factor, that it's even if it's not they didn't have the biggest budget or the highest production value or all of those things, there are those games that have just that X factor that just make it amazing. And that usually comes down to, and I believe there's like a level of passion that's involved with that,
Sure.
that you have that creative, like somebody just really puts their whole soul into something. And so I think we'll see more of those come out. That's what my hope is anyway, that we see more of that come out from, because like you said, those are the things that tend to rise in like the App Store and things like that. I think another interesting factor to all of this is, I think there's a real need, and we've seen a little bit of this, but there's a real need to sort of go out and convert more, right? Like, and more on an intentional level, try to showcase and show people what's available. Because if we think of like any other industry, really other industry that tries to go or does go mass market and starts to kind of bring in more and more users, the way that we advertise or kind of market that changes. And we see a lot of changes in our current world where Super Bowl ads or advertisements on like the TV and stuff aren't as done as much, and people are finding new ways to advertise and market. But I see some interesting things. If we look at Power Rangers, Renegade Games did Power Rangers a little bit ago, and we have some of these like IPs that are coming to Kickstarter more frequently, and some would argue that that's a detriment, and some would argue that it's a benefit.
Go ahead.
I was just say the major benefit that I see from that is simply exposing individuals to this world, right? People that might be interested in Ninja Turtles more than they're interested in board games, but they then realize this is really fun.
And I think Kickstarter, one of the things that I think gets lost in the mix is that Kickstarter represents like taking away indie, taking away tabletop, take all that stuff out. Kickstarter's just a participatory way to shop, right? Yep. So like if you think of it as like farm to table, or you think of it as these other movements where people want to be involved in the things that they're buying, and there's a value and an interest in a social enlightenment engagement thing, that's the Kickstarter offers that avenue of participation when you're purchasing something. And so that becomes a significant driver. And so that's why I think you see more and more models that do that. It's not just a pre-order. There's the relationship aspect of it. I know the person. When I order a game from Asmodee, I have no access. I have no engagement.
Yeah.
But these other services, maybe I have to wait longer to get the thing, right? Like I'm not getting it in the mail the next day, but I have this opportunity to feel like I have a connection with a person who's related to the product more than simply, just getting early access, fear of, what is that? Like fear of missing out, or whatever that acronym is. So I think that's a big part of it. We've gone to the limit on my video recording capabilities using this, or I'm not going to be able to save it out. So I do want to wrap it up. But thanks so much for joining me and chatting, and thanks everyone for listening. Hopefully it was interesting, and so it's crowdox.com, right? If somebody wants to learn more, /y, I guess, if you want the full download. But awesome, thanks for being on, and I'm sure I'll see you at one of the next conventions, man.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll see you then.
Okay, talk to you later.
Take care.
Bye. Hey everybody, Edo here, and thanks for watching Gaming with Edo. Reviews over here on this playlist, League and Insider videos over here on this one. Subscribe, share, all that good stuff. But most importantly, play some great games. Thanks.